Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction.
Yep, it's another victory for not having the right audio go out. Corrado's laughing. Uh-oh. I'm seeing the beach ball turning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Non-responsive applications. Oh, boy.
Yeah,
we can hear you, but it looks like
All
the
right.
video's
Yeah,
maybe something.
No, that's okay. That's not a problem. We can worry about that later. Cool. Okay. Well, and I went to the trouble of changing the scrolling text. So I'm going to leave that up for a second so you can all enjoy that.
So
how ridiculous. All right. We'll move on. This wouldn't be any good if it was great every time, perfect every time, would it? Here we go. First thing to talk about is Camellia World. That's Berlin in May 6th to 8th. And our special guest, who is a visionary, because this is Vision Under Construction, as you didn't hear with the audio off. And he will be with us, Robert Pearson. Rob will be with us May 7th in Berlin. So if you're anywhere near Berlin, check that out. Let's see here. I'm not going to mention the other things because we have a guest this time, and we're just going to go right to talking about that. So I'm going to introduce him, Rob Pierce, who I met through, well, that's a whole other thing, but say hello, Rob, before we...
Hey, guys. Thanks so much, Randy. I'm thrilled, man. Always.
We're really glad to have you. And as it happens, I heard about VR Wine, WEIN, from the Distributed Future podcast. Tim Panton, who was one of us until not too long ago, he made the introduction. Rob came to Bordeaux. I was going to say Berlin, but he's already in Berlin. He came to Bordeaux, did a very interesting presentation, and I'm going to show you. Here we go. That presentation, just have a quick still here. And what you can notice right away, this was in the school where my wife's teaches. God, it's only been 3 years, and here we are.
You're ahead of me.
My wife teaches at this school. There were men and women there, but here's the thing, and I think this is significant. It was only women who actually cared to come over and check this out. Rob is a handsome fellow, it's true. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but you're so tall, he knows that, but I mean, you're so tall, Rob, that somebody asked my wife, mais qui est le petit monsieur à côté? Meaning, who's the little gentleman next to Father Pearson? And now she tells me that every day, the petit monsieur, the little guy.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I just want to make a comment. I did ask every one of these young ladies if they would join us in Berlin, and they all declined. I'm terribly sorry to hear that, but that's the way it is. But Rob, give us a little bit of background on how you got where you are. If you want to talk about you are a sommelier, you can talk a little bit about that, and just a brief resume of who you are before we get into what we're actually going to be doing.
Awesome, man. Try to be concise here. I have always found, I think that curiosity is maybe the most important human trait. And I think that my whole life I've really kind of tried to keep that as the filter of how I perceive everything. And when I was in college, my mother was running a PR firm, and I had an opportunity to take a job. My mom said, hey, this guy's opening a wine store. We're doing the grand opening PR. Do you want to make some money? I said, sure. Guy turned out to be the former CEO of PepsiCo, then Perrier, moved down to Cary, North Carolina after 9/11. And he turned out to be like this amazing sort of, like wine romantic, and just taught me everything about it. And me being so analytical, had the opportunity to dig through these wines, and it was like candy for me. This newfound game of figuring out like, oh my God, there's complexity and depth to something that I didn't even care about, and that sort of propelled me into Los Angeles, where I moved to right after school. Got a job at a super famous store there called Wally's Wine and Spirits. I was the assistant to one of the owners, Christian Navarro, who I can certainly thank for, my God, like absolutely uncomparable sort of like wine experiences I had becoming a somm, and really giving me a cool foundation for the understanding that wine's really like a perishable art form, man. Of course, there are many different kinds of wines, and you can, have something just to enjoy and drink or socialize or whatever, but they can be really profound too. While I was in LA, I did all the LA things, voiceover, singer, did some acting. Oh my God, as you do out there, you just kind of work the way that you work. I produced a film or two, and yeah, had some troubling times, reorganized, always been kind of like a forward-thinking dude, bit of a futurist, mainly a humanist, but always had my eyes on things. My schooling was cog sci and psychology, and joined a sort of an entrepreneurs group called Metal out in LA. A lot of great people out there, a lot of important people, and I learned a lot. I moved to Berlin and had my eyes on doing a startup, and I think that this, perhaps more so than any other time in the world, especially perspective of recent sort of events and ethical discussions about tech and what's going on. I think it's a great time to take a step back and really look at what we as, startup people who are tech-minded, people who are, rooted in ethics, thinking about humanity first, and how tech can improve humans and improve our livelihoods more so than can we build something? Let's build something. I don't like tech in a vacuum. I think it's absolutely crucial that right now, more than ever, we're doing more sort of preventative, forward-looking, ethical policy creation as opposed to reactionary policy, which is really what's going on right now. So that kind of brings us to today. Last year, I looked at, what percentage of the people around the world understand wine? What percentage of the people enjoy wine? It's, absolutely discrepant too. So I figured, all right, how do we resolve this? Done a lot of talking in Vietnam about, theories of knowledge, theories of learning, and, this idea that, people learn best when they're overwhelmed. All of their senses are supposed to be coordinated in space for short periods of time. You learn a whole lot, experiential learning theory. And decided to team up with a consortium here that builds software. And I said, look, let's do something that gives people a tool to help them understand wine better. And of course, this, that's one point, and it, can be applied to a lot of different places. So I have now a startup that's really still in its infancy, especially with German bureaucracy. Just kidding, not really. It's pretty difficult, man. It's taken a lot of time, but we've got, as you saw in that picture, the ability for people to wear VR hardware. And in this case, that's an Oculus Go. That's a self-contained unit, so we can have people taste wine, be guided by a sommelier. This is live tasting. This tech isn't supposed to replace humans. It's just supposed to enhance this experience. So it's a wine experience wearing VR that's static. It's not, there aren't moving parts there, but it gives people the ability to understand how humans taste, smell, and are sort of how to utilize our senses to improve our own lives. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Right. And we saw that it's funny because the photos that we just looked at, by the way, that website we were looking at, let me put that back for a second.
That's the end of last summer on my screen right now. So you can kind of get an idea. That's older hardware.
Okay, wait a second. I've got my own. There you go.
That's the website.
I've got the same. Yeah, it's actually the same thing. So vrwein.com.
Yeah, that's it, man. And so what you're seeing in this picture is one of the first sort of dry runs that we did. And this is old hardware. That's the Samsung Gear VR, which actually does require a cell phone, to be utilized as your processor, your sort of your computer, if you will. And since then we've decided to switch off of that for a number of reasons, least of which isn't liability plus expense if something breaks. But we're using Oculus Go now. It's the second generation self-contained headset. They just put out the Oculus whatever it's called, is having some issues after launch, but forget what the newest Oculus self-contained unit. We're looking to, frankly, one of the things I'm working with in Berlin with the government here is to hopefully do some proprietary hardware in Berlin that's made here in Germany specifically for this, so that if you'll notice here in the picture, you can actually see how it would be pretty difficult to drink and wear the headset at the same time. So we're trying to resolve that. And the government here is really interested in what I'm doing, especially because in Germany here, we consume about 152 million hectoliters of wine every year.
Yeah, Germany is obviously, a lot of people don't think about this, but France isn't the only country. France and America, Napa Valley and Sonoma are not the only producers of wine. Obviously, Italy has great wines, but Germany has a lot of wine and kinds of wine that you're not going to find elsewhere, like Rieslings and so on. I wanted to mention that the lighter headsets, you're right. I didn't even think about it until you look at these photos. And yeah, you couldn't easily bring, you're not able to smell the wine, you don't get the nose and so on. So this is a problem. And I think at the tasting I participated in at the school, what happened was those things were very light. So the people who were tasting would put it up like so, and they would be looking at it, but then they could easily lower it. They're very light, and they could lower it to smell the wine and to drink it.
Yeah, realistically, Randy, these headsets, these units are not, they're about as heavy as a dive mask. If you guys
that's not too bad.
Sparkling, they're about the same weight, and they're very sort of durable, and you can just pop these arms off. So as you said, man, sometimes that's just the easiest way to do it, and just have this unit. So you're doing something like this: taste, smell, whatever. Look in here, and you can have a what's sort of in view in there that breaks down aromas, flavors, etc., for people to understand like what they are smelling. And then at the same time, guidance is needed. This experience is designed for the novice, Einsteiger. So we want people to understand that wine should be inclusive, man. And so many other things in the world that are considered luxury or, to some extent, accessible to the few. Everyone should have the ability to get at this, because I think that it improves humans' ability to understand how their own senses work. And I think one of the questions that I often open with is like, hey, has anyone here actually in a classroom setting, a formal setting, been asked or taught how your own senses work? I mean, humans are trial and error, like fully, especially when it comes to senses. So the idea, I think there are some sort of like eye-opening moments when people understand like, hey man, these are really powerful things. Your senses inform your experience in life, and when you start manipulating those or improving them, or more to the point, in my case, when you start improving your understanding of how those work and how they inform your experience in life, man, you're going to have a better time overall. There's just it's an overarching kind of thing that really does carry over to a number of things. Wine, sure, but at the same time, it's like, wouldn't you rather be more perceptive going through life than less perceptive? And this is part of that. And it's rooted in science, absolutely. I think the easiest sort of something that's it's not disputable. Think about people that don't have certain accesses to senses, like blind people. Their hearing is improved vastly, against other people's senses of hearing or touch or whatever that may be. And it's really a similar situation here. We're trying to improve the baseline, the bottom line of human experience, and help people understand like, hey, this isn't the end. We're really at the beginning of what we're going to be. We don't need to get into like transhumanism and stuff, but that's a discussion that has to happen at some point too. And I think some of the luminaries now, Musk and whoever else, they're doubling, tripling down on the fact like, humans, we're not going to make it unless, because the world isn't full of good people, and ethics aren't profitable. So in a lot of places, in a lot of ways, it's going to be necessary at some point to understand that we humans need to utilize technology in a way that's going to not only enhance our experience, but also compete with whatever's coming.
Okay, let's zoom back for a second, though. I want to make a couple of statements with regard to all this, so that people don't get the wrong impression.
Sure.
Because a lot of people know a lot of things about wine, and that includes you and I think Corrado. I don't know about Hank and Jay, but Michael knows some things about wine and has qualifications. I worked for about 20 years with the best winemakers in the world in our company. That doesn't mean I know anything, but the point is that when you experience something with people who know how wine is made, what you learn isn't only an intellectual. In other words, it doesn't matter that you can, sniff a thing, and go, oh, that was the west side of the vineyard, and it was done between. That's crap. First of all, that's a fiction that is funny and amusing. And by the way, as you know, Rob, blind tastings, professionals have been confused between red and white in blind tastings. It's not common, but it could happen. But what I want to say, what's important is what you're learning isn't a lot of facts about the chemistry, because wine is, you're farming grapes. That's a huge, huge part of winemaking is farming. You're farming. It's good techniques. But once you get past that, the folks who are sitting and tasting wine pre-VR, okay, they're tasting wine and they're tasting it maybe with someone who knows what they're doing. And that person is going to say, these are the grapes and this is how we did this. There are amazing things about, in fact, we could get into this for hours and won't, but there are facets of winemaking that involve blending different grapes. There are, that would be Bordeaux. On the other hand, in Burgundy, there's blending different small parcels of land in the same grape. So, I mean, there's an infinite amount of variety in just those things, but you don't need to memorize and you don't need to know all that. What you want to do is be guided through, kind of like an acid trip, by the way. You want to be guided through, no, don't do that, do this. You really want to just hear about the nose of the wine. And I'm going to give this back to you so that you can tell us how you compare what you do to the classic schematic. And the classic paradigm is, if I was sitting with someone, they would say, okay, first thing we do is look at the color. You're looking at the glass, look at the color of the wine. How does it, and then you go on, you could go through an hour of that if you wanted to, or 5 minutes. Then you sniff the nose of the wine. Then you taste the wine, and that wine has a taste of certain things, very surprising things. I mean, a couple of not fortunate things are pencil lead and furniture polish. Those are common terms that people use, but also coffee. And who would think that there's coffee in wine? And green pepper in the region where we work with people here. Anyway,
Carmenere,
compare, Rob, if you will, compare that experience with what I just said, which is the color, nose, taste.
Yeah. Well, man, as you said, like a lot of that stuff, I'm not going to call it superfluous, but it's definitely, there's a resolution that has to happen between, winemakers who we're talking about farmers. These are farmers, dude. They know about farming, and there are, I mean, my God, that's how we as humans started settling as opposed to being nomadic. We started agriculture. There is a massive amount of information that's there that, can be useful, can be cool to include when we're tasting. But for me, things like color, things like all that stuff, we can get to that later, is basically how I perceive this. I want people to understand the most basic things. And that's why in this sense, ultimately the object, or the subject of the tasting, it doesn't have to be wine. It could be cheese, it could be coffee, it could be anything. Because what we're trying to do here is help people better understand how they are and why they are tasting, smelling what they're doing. So for instance, as you would be sitting in, whether it's, WSET or whatever the situation is in a pro guided thing, you're like, let's take a look at the color, let's smell it, let's, write your notes down and all these kinds of things. For me, it's more like, all right, let's talk about what confuses you, or what is I want to remove this idea of like mystery and the way that people write wine notes as being poetry. And I keep in mind, what do the masses encounter when they are trying to buy wine, order wine, enjoy wine? And I'm trying to address those things specifically. So this idea of structure or whatever, I want that out the window for me, because I feel like that is also part of this long-standing formula of exclusivity. with wine. I don't want that. I want inclusivity. I want, easy access, no questions are wrong kind of approach to this. And again, it's all rooted in, hey man, you're humans. This is about you understanding yourself better and improving your own ability. So don't worry about what color it is or any of that stuff right now. We will be able to address those questions as they come. I try to keep it simple, man. Acidity, tannin, how it feels in your mouth, understanding that 80% of what you taste comes from your sense of smell. So take your time smelling this stuff, man. Also, physics, chemistry, all of this is real. So people that, one of the biggest things and one of the quickest turnoffs for people in wine tasting is, I don't taste that. I don't smell that. I don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't make sense to me. It just sounds like flowery language. Rose in wine, are you like, I don't get that. So we have to tell them like, yo, man, you have a glass of wine. There's liquid in there. There's air above it. Georg Riedel, this awesome Austrian glass maker, and his son Max taken over the company now. But the amount of time and effort that they've gone into spending, designing the appropriate bowls to channel the correct aromatics for individual types of wines and grape varietals, it's absolutely mind blowing. They've done the same thing with spirits as well. My favorite happens to be their tequila glass. If you have never enjoyed tequila, oh my God, pardon the endorsement here, but my God, pick up a Riedel tequila glass and have your mind blown. But the idea is,
I didn't know they made tequila glasses.
Dude, look, man, when you're here, I will bring a couple and we will sort that out, man, because it is mind blowing.
Hey, quick interjection. We have Corrado would like to say something. I just wanted to say, and I don't mean this in the stupid adolescent way, but wine is so much like sex. And what you were saying a few minutes ago, and if I get literal, people go crazy about odor and so on. But so we won't go there. But the point is that, first of all, people pretend to know. They don't. That's why there were no men in that photo I showed, I think, because the women came up and wanted to know, and I was listening to a couple of conversations. I had some conversations with them, and they want to know, hey, what is this about? Yeah. It's just exactly what you were saying. Yeah. And the guys are like, well, I already know everything about that. They were just trying to think about how they were going to get with the ladies. But the point is, anyway, there's a very sensual, and Corrado said passion. I'm not sure what he meant, but if he meant what I think he meant, and he'll confirm it in 1 second. When you meet people who make wine, yes, they're farmers, but they're also chemists. And when they make these, particularly in Bordeaux, which I know very well, Bordeaux, you take 2 or 3 different grapes and you mix those grapes, but these folks are tasting the juice that hasn't been fermented yet. Right. And they're blending them, they think they know anyway, or try to know how this is going to mature and how am I going to blend this. It's absolutely astounding. Now, but you don't need to know that to enjoy wine. Corrado, I'm going to turn it over to you before I go on for the rest of the hour.
No, yeah, of course. I've been a member of a wine club, very simple wine club for a couple of years now, and I've drunk wine as a good Italian for all my adult life, and even before that. So wine is not part of some sort, especially in Italy and in France, probably, that elite expression of wealth or something. You drink wine at the table in your family normally. Probably the quality of wine gets better with your age as soon as you can afford something better. But what I found after these monthly meetings is that I'm better at appreciating what's behind the wine, just not what's upfront coming to me, but what's going on before the wine reaches my glass. And what difference it could make, and also literally the physics, as you said, of the wine. One thing that fascinates me is how the wine interacts with the glass. When you roll it around the glass and then you see what we call the legs that are falling down, if a wine rounds off the glass quickly or clings on the wine, on the glass, sorry, it forebodes for something different in your mouth, a different sensation. So you're prepared for what you're going to get. And that's something that you get with experience and with guidance, with people that are experts and know the background and guide you into that. It's very difficult, I found, because we had a number of people coming at our meetings to explain wines, to find the right people that has the right technical background, the right passion, and the communication skills to convey everything. That is a combination that is really, really hard to find. And we had a few very good, and sadly, a couple of instances where the guy was really technically good, but was a really bad communicator, and the overall experience was not as good. And I guess using your technology and using other technologies around wine, we can expand the gamut of taste, sight, and all senses that we are using. So we are expanding the surface that is hitting us when we drink wine. And I very welcome that. One observation is the problem, the logistics with VR glasses that are interfering with the physicality of drinking wine and of the interaction with your people, the people around you, might be something that needs to be trimmed a bit. But it's fascinating and it's very interesting. If I can ask, what do you show, without telling too much, but what can we see through these VR glasses?
Yeah, great. First of all, I want to make 2 points. First of all, Corrado, as a pro VO guy, your accent is so amazing. It just makes me so happy that you're legit Scottish and Italian at the same time. And it's freaking brilliant. Like, I've never even been to Scotland, mate, but you sound so freaking, yeah, it's awesome, dude. Anyways, the thing is, man, and another, to Randy's point, you know, I'm not imagining myself as like this Tony Robbins of, you know, men in the wine world. But to tie that in, people who are, and as you mentioned, Randy, like the guys feeling, oh, well, I don't, you know, I want to remove this idea that, that this point of pride or something, people asking for help. I want to be able to have people at that level understand that, like, yo, man, this is still for everybody. We can cater to you. But Corrado, to your point, like I do, you know, as you described, I do really well in those areas. Where I'm gated is certainly the hardware thing right now. And that's why I think, you know, the first time I pitched to an investor that came to one of the tastings I held, the first thing out of her mouth was, listen, I've got contacts in Shenzhen, in China. Let's figure out how to get custom headsets made so that we can do this and roll with it, so we can at least remove one of these hurdles to streamline the experience a bit. As far as like how I interact with people at the table, that's not a problem. The only problems that I can see is that people have an idea of what VR is. Yeah. So they have been told and marketed to, VR is for you to put a headset on and then you're living inside of this headset and that's it. And that's your experience. It's you and, you know, think of it like maybe a video game or something. Whereas in my world, in this particular use case, what we're doing is giving an immersive and very, very accurately made static VR environment so that you do exist inside of it. But there aren't moving parts. There's nothing, you know, dude, VR is such a strong tool. When you deny people's sense of sight and replace it with something else. If you guys have ever done any sort of VR before that has motion, that relies on low latency, and that latency is not low, you can make, I've got to be honest with you, like I'm not trying to exaggerate too much here, but you can turn a VR headset into a torture device in about half a second. If you've got people in it and you're doing this with it, like for instance, you know, if you're looking into the unit, and when you do this, when you have lag time for where your eyes are looking, it will take, man, depending upon the person, obviously, not everybody's an astronaut, but depending upon that lag time, people will get sick instantly. Now you add alcohol to that equation and it's a bad idea. So as far as like risk management and all that stuff, I decided, and we decided, the collaborators, that we want to do a static environment, very, very bright, very welcoming, very comforting, and then we break down individually graphically. And right now we're still using our sort of first iteration graphics in this environment. But for instance, we've got a very bright, warm, sort of classic kitchen. Everything is white, clean, and inviting. And in front of this, and you're basically seated at a big table. And in front of you, you will see any number of, sort of well depicted, sort of photographed in a light box kind of quality, whether it's a lime or cherries or whatever the case is. That's how we present things. And the human element is always present. Part of this idea of this theory of learning for experiential knowledge is that people need to not only be looking at things, smelling and tasting, but they need to be talking, actively listening, and at the same time moving and using their sense of touch. So it's touching the glass, hearing. All of these things come together and culminate into a really, really great experience. So you're absolutely right in how things need to be resolved. It's difficult because right now being gated by hardware it's a tough situation. I'd rather be gated by software any day of the week. That's not I think the entire world is gated by hardware right now. But that's really what's up. And I found thus far, because of how I'm marketing this particular part, this aspect, this channel of this product, is a wine tasting that's enhanced so that you can understand what you're doing better.
I have a couple of questions.
Please.
Very quick. Could your suggestion, your visual suggestion of the taste, smell, or something, alter the perception of those that are tasting the wine and guide them onto the wrong path? First, the second point is, and that escaped me. Oh, I'm really sorry.
No, it's good.
Thinking about another thing. But if you answer that question first, do you find that could it be possible to use that technology badly to sell a wine that is not what it is with those suggestions?
Man, I really appreciate that question, because that really gets to the heart of why I am doing anything with tech. I spent a pretty intense turn as a producer of video games that kind of soured me on the whole, like, getting into the world of tech. Frankly, a good team is great. A bad team is the worst. I had a good team, but it was, good team and then a worse sort of company. I think that you're absolutely right. People underestimate, and I think even us right now underestimate, how powerful VR is. And of course how impressionable humans are, how open to suggestion that we are. You can certainly manufacture that. However, at the same time, there are scent molecules that are real. They do exist. You can create something that smells like something artificially. You can create something that tastes like something artificially. So whereas you can, suggest something otherwise, you can smell a mint and it's going to smell like mint, and people are able to identify it. It's not so much these individual nuances. As you know, with wine, you have to give them a framework to understand what smell is. And I like to present it as, listen guys, usually, and with few exceptions, stainless steel fermentation, concrete, whatever you're doing, think of it as you're smelling. First of all, smell is not a static point. It's not a snapshot that stays there. Over time, smell changes. You got fluid in the glass. Air is a fluid. Bernoulli's principle, bro. Everything that is like this, we're talking about a fluid against a fluid. So air is moving, just as the scent molecules are doing this. They're not static. So as you're smelling one thing, I could be smelling something else. However, as you know, everybody here that's had wine, those smells evolve as the wine stays in the glass, as oxygenation happens, etc. So the idea is give them the framework. I say, imagine that you've got a wooden bowl in front of you, and inside of that bowl are some of these ingredients. Express, how I taste something or smell something as, like, fruit, but the peel of the fruit that we're talking about. Rose perhaps, but like a rose infused potpourri or something. It depends on the situation, but there's definitely what you just said scares me because it's true. And that sort of goes into a different direction of this conversation, ethics and such. And I'm highly concerned with that. But as far as like how I alleviate that problem is, I do try to build in this tasting, usually lasts about 60 minutes, 90 minutes. We do 6 wines. a bit of bubbly at the beginning to say hello. And I just try to give them the framework so they can understand how to smell, how and what is coming at them. All of these smells are typically like stacked on top of each other, or they're next to each other. Like Randy said, you've got pencil lead, sometimes like graphite, that sort of underlies everything, and it's next to green pepper, and it's sort of all coating this core of like either cassis or black cherry or whatever the case is. And then sort of above it, you've got these other aromatics like, you know, violet or whatever the case is with what wine you're drinking. I mean, so giving people this idea of how to approach a wine and approach these aromas to understand them, because there is a sort of structure and physics to how these things move through time. So there is a, I'm not going to call it a formula, but there's a way to help people understand what's going on without misleading them, I think is the best way to say that. And then of course, dude, you can, oh my God, who knows what's going on right now and where, as far as like human testing with VR and stuff. I guarantee you, we know about what, 20-30% of the VR use case in the world.
You know what I would like to try with respect to wine and VR? You'd have to have, of course, in all cases, you have to have a presentation designed for it. But some years ago, I did, when I was just starting out, I bought the Wine Enthusiast Essential Oils Kit, which was about 128 little bottles of all these essences that they describe in the, you know, how the wines are, how the smells are the library. So you can train your nose, which was sort of the first step, and then later went to the store and bought a whole bunch of things so we could train our palates a little bit as well. And but to do that, the problem with the oils is that they are oils, and so they're kind of abstracted from the wine in a way. Whereas
like the oil.
if you were doing that in a structured way, in a structured course, where the courseware included the visual supporting visual components, and you're going through, you're not going to go through 120, but you know, you might go through a couple of dozen of those oils, because when somebody says cassis, most people actually can't really put their finger on what cassis tastes like. Or if somebody says cigar box or tobacco, you know, a lot of cases it helps. The more you have different senses, the sight, the visual, the auditory, you know, the intellectual, supporting this, it just helps foster the learning experience. And that would be a wonderful value add or a way to go about doing that VR thing. It'd be cool.
Rob, have you considered, instead of using VR glasses, using augmented reality glasses? So something that's not so bulky and doesn't impede your vision, but you just have an overlay of something.
Dude, that's actually a really easy answer. Cost, design costs, and I mean hardware costs, design costs, and that's pretty much where it stops, and that's where it ends right there. That conversation ends. Not to mention, you know, of course, we're waiting on these things like AR glasses to be iterated upon to get lighter weight, etc. The Mobile World Congress that just happened in Barcelona, and what am I trying to say? The what's the Vegas show? CES just happened as well, and Consumer Electronics Show. And you know, a lot of the new stuff is promising. The new HoloLens is like, you know, frankly, I don't know if we can swear, but I want to. It's like a holy crap, pretty amazing. And they've had collaborative use cases at a university called Case Western University in the US for medical applications. And I mean, it's amazing. I've given a few talks on this, and to be able to see, I mean, like, as far as medical costs and as far as like this idea of how difficult it is and cost preventative it is for people to become doctors that want to, one of the greatest things about AR glasses is removing the need for cadavers to do so much, you know, experimentation. So we can see now with AR glasses collaboratively a heart in 4 dimensions with people in the room looking at this at the same time. Would I like to do something like that with wine? Absolutely, man. It's just, unfortunately, it's 2019. We can't have that conversation in a way that competes with how much this costs me until probably 2023. Realistically, it's going to take one of the phone manufacturing giants. I'm going to assume Apple will probably do this, and they're going to hold this up, and they're going to say, guys, we were wrong. This is not only is this is this detrimental to psychology, especially developmental psych for kids, but this is a burden. We want to get rid of this, and we want to do wearables. We want to do whatever the case is. And then at that point in time, prices will get driven down enough so that we can have these kinds of discussions and say, absolutely, man, let's figure out what that hardware solution is and get people out of, you know, this VR space and more collaboratively able to sort of do and enjoy that stuff. That is, if that were available right now, I would be doing that most likely. You know,
How about AR?
that's what we were just talking about, AR. Like, so, you know,
Yeah.
and that I just feel like, you know, all the stuff, the studies, everything that I've read from Gartner or Greenlight or whoever talking about like what's coming as far as who's investing in what technology and when, you know, like, again, Randy, I think you and I were talking about this the other day very briefly. You know, the 5th generation of Wi-Fi. By the way, Chrono, this is another thing that's kind of a necessity for, you know, being able to do this kind of like wild mixed reality stuff or AR where you can be anywhere and kind of do this. It's going to take some time. Now, what we're producing as far as the software, it's not demanding for bandwidth at all, but you know, it would certainly be nice to be able to make it more robust. Like what we're doing right now, one of the products that we do is we go to wineries, especially I'm hoping Chateau as well, and say, hey, listen, we can come in here with a geologist who will laser map everything accurately to what's going on in your place so that we can really go toward that VR direction in the right way. So it's not just, hey, wine tasting, whatever, but we can develop it further. And we started doing this in Catalonia. We've got one bodega under our belts, and we're going to be doing more and more and more. But we go there, we map the cellar, we map the tasting room, the vineyard, whatever they want to use as their budget, and then present that in the VR cases so that we can have people sitting at, you know, the table at Obrion or something that you can taste and sit around and actually see, you know, what's going on and how that looks and how that feels. And this again goes to that point of wine should be inclusive. I mean, not everybody can come to Bordeaux. Not everyone can come to France or Napa Valley or, you know, Colchagua or whatever the situation is. You can't do so many things with wine. However, wine's freaking beautiful, man. There's a winery at the foot of the Himalayas right now. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. There's like, who wouldn't want to go and sit outside with the freaking Himalayas in the background, having it's called a AOYUN. I think that, I don't know how they say it, but and they're developing like Bordeaux level, like you know, really good stuff. So the idea is, man, I would love to make better use of tech, but what we got right now is VR. So we want to design these immersive experiences that are wonderful, inclusive, but do not in any way remove the human interaction out of the idea of a wine tasting. Because, you know, Randy, as you said earlier, being like, dude, drink wine, be social. That's one of the great things about wine, is it does unify. It brings people together. It's a social thing. You don't have to think about it, but damn, when it's good, it just, you know, things just go really, really well.
Let's
So
try to
is
get,
the-
go. Well,
Sorry, I was going to ask.
Go.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, is this something like a restaurant or a wine tasting group would buy some of these and then they would have like a social gathering, or is this like a virtual meetup type of thing?
No, dude, you know what? Great question. I didn't mean to cut you off. Are you doing? I apologize.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
So the company that I've got here, we've got a couple of different products, and you know, they're not fully developed right now, but that's certainly one of them. You know, what we're building right now on the software side of things is basically like a platform. If you guys have ever been in and around restaurants, they operate off of point of sale systems that basically give you the ability to customize what you're offering, you know, at the price, etc. I mean, imagine like a Unix-based system where you can kind of just build it from the ground up. What we're doing is doing that with wine so that we can tailor specific you know, graphics to match with specific wines. So for instance, if we're doing, you know, 04 Obrion Blanc, again, one of my favorite white wines in the world. We're talking about Bordeaux. I love Obrion anyways. The ability for us to take a tasting note that is approved by the Chateau, that's what they believe is in their wine, and then portray that in the VR space, in their tasting room, that's exactly one of the products that we're trying to do. And of course, it would work the same way after we do that, presenting it to a restaurant and say, hey guys, I think, maybe not even a restaurant, maybe at the bar at a restaurant, or for me, these are the things that I'm going after. Wine stores, to improve engagement with clients there, restaurants for the same reason, concierges, hotels, airlines, executive lounges, forward cabins that people have access to. And of course, this goes back to the hardware thing. When the hardware gets better, it's easier to deal with. But my favorite of all these ideas that I've had is I want to develop, and damn it, I just don't know who to talk to about this, but I think this is the moneymaker. I think this is the idea. Don't steal my idea. The idea to have a kiosk in a mall, a high-end mall, and by the way, all high-end shopping malls, all high-end shit, they're all stuff, pardon me, is going to the VR space. That's the reason people are coming back to malls. And you ask Jeff Bezos about this, and that's one of the reasons that they're doing more and more retail locations for Amazon, is to try to offset some of this. But either way, point is, kiosks, think of like an adult video game. You're able to sit down, you get a glass, you get the VR stuff, and you've got a guided tour, whether it's VO or whatever the case is, interactive video in the headset itself. And you, for, €2 or $5 or whatever the case is, you get your 2 ounces or your 100 ml of wine of your choice using there's a really, really great system called the Enotech system, which is like a wine preservation system, especially for like unique and high-end wines. So you put your bucks in there, you get the wine, you have the experience, and like, oh my God, all of a sudden that is a thing. Who would not do that at an airport, at an executive, when you got nothing to do but kill time? Just the novelty of it would earn God knows how much money. You get those in all the airports that are pitch it to one airline. Talk to, Emirates is a bit of a hard sell because of the whole religious alcohol thing, but the higher end airlines, man, just go, hey, American, you guys are trying to improve your first class stuff. Let's talk turkey. Let's do this.
So they'd be talking to Siri on this in this scenario.
Yeah, no, dude, I'm a professional VO guy. I'll do the damn VO. I'm happy to do it. Why not?
No, but you'd have to do recognition with answers. I'm sorry, Hank, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say there's plenty. I see these wine tasting bars opening up in more and more airports in the United States. I'm not sure what the platform looks like over there, but I could totally see the same people who would be in there and they want to try something unique and try an immersive experience. That would be a really good combination of the two.
There's executive lounges everywhere, not just in airports, in very different locations, in high swanky hotels or business centers where you have
malls, man.
Everywhere. But that brings everything back to that elite environment that we want to avoid. We want to make this popular. We want to
that is an interesting
wine back to the people.
Well,
it comes from people.
No, absolutely. But you can also offer a product with different sort of aesthetics to it for people. Yeah. So you want to. I mean, obviously, targeted marketing is a thing. That's why that is like that, and that's why advertising is successful. Is you can know your demographic, pitch it a certain way, do it the right way, and always, seriously, man, always keep it inclusive and ethical before anything else. Like I swear to God, the rest of my life, forget profits, I don't need a lot to be happy. I just want people to have a better experience in life. And I think that this is part of the beginnings of that process. And I think it's very important that these kinds of things get, a fair look right now, because we are on the precipice. Like, I don't know. I don't think people understand when cell phones start going away and we start having a world where wearables and AR. I mean, can you imagine, Brandy, if you had Google Maps on your glasses, inconspicuous Google Maps, where you can have a walking path that shows you where you're going? Like, who the hell would not use that? So imagine that times 1 billion users around the world, and within a month of them releasing that. That's the kind of thing, like, all of this, everything is going to change. Just like the world changed when Apple came out with the damn iPhone, everything is going to change again. And it's very important for us to be having these conversations about, ethical tech and why we're doing things instead of like,
because we don't want to breed glass holes.
This is
We've already had a generation of glass holes. We don't need to breed more of those.
Yeah,
That was the
Interesting.
smallest generation ever, though.
Interesting observation. About 25 years ago, I was involved in a TV series where at the time I worked in production, but in that particular occasion, I was in front of the camera. And it was TV Ontario, who's basically PBS up in Ontario. And it was, they had given this one production company a contract to do about 60 half-hour shows that were how-tos. And that was consistent with their educational mandate, and so was a lot of single camera production was great. And the two most popular shows in the series, ours was a series of 4, and there was another one that was a series of like 8, was making beer. Actually, there are 3: making beer, making kitchen cabinets, and making and flying kites.
Okay.
And ours was the kite one. But all 3 of when they pitched back, after a couple of years later, they pitched to do those were introductory how-to things. When they went back and say, well, let's do a slightly more in-depth one, and the network said no, because the minute you narrow it down from that absolute beginner's introduction to something to somebody who's going to take the next step, your market falls away by like 90%. And so at that point, it's not broadcast. Now it's for Netflix in the modern era. But the idea that the same thing is true of wine. And one of the problems that we faced, and I faced it, which is why when I was doing wine down the WSET path, I only went as far as I did, because you get to a certain point where the process of learning, and it's still really enjoyable to experience all the different wines and to taste things and to go, even the structure is good. But when you start debating, is it pencil lead, or is it graphite, or is it, then, the language and trying to refine and put a point on it starts to separate people and not bring them together. And that's when we're becoming really exclusive. So I thought you have a great approach, because you really want to draw people in. Those people who will go on, they will go on, and there's so much more for them to go to.
Sure.
But this is like your first roller coaster ride.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. As Rob said earlier, I'm a wine lover, not a wine connoisseur, as I always say. And so when you're like, what do you taste? You ask that in the abstract, and without guidance, they're being overwhelmed by their senses, because the first time they're actually asked to concentrate on it. I always like when they rattle off the suggestions. Some people might taste green pepper. Some people might taste vanilla, or whatever the different things are, versus you should be tasting this, you should be tasting that.
Right,
no, not necessarily. But giving them a little bit of guidance, and all of a sudden they explore from that point on. It's kind of almost like a Buddhist meditation type of thing, of just exploring it, versus just saying, do you taste anything? And then, it's a non-judgmental way of talking about it, of just suggestions of what some people might, and you may taste something totally different, which is fine too.
Yeah.
I could get into another aside for a second. Again, the way the olfactory organs work in humans, it's a chemical process, right? Your nose, I don't even know how much we know about it, but I know that much, and I know that we know that much. It's a chemical process. It's molecular, it's atomic. So when one person's coffee is another person's fecal matter. I mean, right. Actually the smell, I know it sounds funny, but I have smelled coffee and thought, wait a minute, literally, and that's happened to me. It's not because I'm the only one. It's because the way that stuff works is obscure, because the way the mind sees it, the way vision works is also obscure, by the way. In other words,
not to be difficult, but I love pinotage. Really, I love pinotage.
hey,
behave, guys.
Anyway, all I'm saying, to resume, because I get off on these tracks, but all I'm saying is that because this is a chemical thing, it's certainly possible that one person's rose is another person's night blooming jasmine. So this is a tough thing. And so what Hank just said, exactly, you can't just say, well, you should be smelling blah, blah, blah. These are suggestions.
Yeah.
And what's great, I have participated also in beginners, with beginners in classes. So although we were professionally involved, we also, went to tastings with beginners. And beginners will question, you know, they'll look at and they'll come up with stuff that you didn't come up with, but then you might smell it and go, yeah, I can see that, you know, or not. Anyway, the point is, there is no precision in this. This is not engineering. So it's important to have the human. I really have doubts about the Siri wine tasting, by the way. I was kidding about that. You need a human being there. And the reason is because the human being, I just don't see AI doing this in the future and canned responses.
No, I agree.
You know, but so you're not going to be out of a job that fast. Okay.
No, let me respond real quick to that, because that's a good point. I can provide a little bit of insight with regard to the subjectivity of, you know, smelling wine. So your olfactory nerve, all of those impulses are governed by your limbic system in your brain. Your limbic system is responsible for your emotions. I do try to make it a point in even the first couple of sentences out of my mouth. It's like, can you, whoever you may be, the audience, can you think of your most significant memories and why? And for me, they are absolutely based in smell. They're absolutely so robustly. I'm like, oh my God! It's like opening a file folder on your computer. I have a particular detergent, that powder liquid, the powder, like yellow colored detergent. I can't remember. It's like some brand. As soon as I smell that, I am in my grandmother's bathroom. I see the tile. I know the time of day. I know, like, everything, man. It's crazy. And so, you know, as I would probably, with a little more preparation, argue you on the ability to bring more sort of specificity into the dissection of what things smell and taste like, because I do believe that there are scent molecules that are present in wine sometimes that are detectable, you know, in the most sort of general and basic terms. But knowing that about our brains and how we perceive things, certainly it's the case that someone's idea of orange is going to be different than my idea of orange. Some people are going to smell that dried orange peel in potpourri because that's what their mother had on the whatever table in the hall. Me, when I smell orange, it's that zest, man. It's that, you know, I worked as a bartender too, and making, you know, whatever old fashions and stuff like that. It's like, dude, that's orange, you know, or it could be artificial orange. Maybe it's somebody wants Hubba Bubba orange gum, or, you know, whatever the case is. So there's always going to be variance. The problem is, it's not a problem, in my opinion. That is how we have an opportunity to be inclusive with this stuff. No one is wrong, man. They just need to be informed about why. And that's why I think that, sure, we, you know, and I don't foresee some sort of automated interactive system when I'm thinking about this kind of kiosk/video game system. I think that it is an informative experience. It's not a game. It's not a test. It's not a crap. I just want people to have the ability to enjoy wine and learn a little bit more about why. And that's it. And I think that, you know, once I sort of iterate upon that and, you know, collaborate with whoever and figure out how to streamline that and how to make it worth people's while and a great product for, you know, call it what, 5 minutes people might spend on that, 10 minutes, I don't know, or however long they want to, if they want to keep buying it. And there will be, you know, certainly more options there. They can have a little tasting and do 1, 2, 3 of this, and this, or whatever the case is. I think that will work, and I think it's just a question of, you know, the production cycle and what assets we're going to deploy to utilize the highest level of engagement with people that want to check it out.
Couldn't agree more. Is there any final comments from anybody? Because we're about to seal off this hour, and I wanted to remind people to check out the site vrwein.com. Also, if by any chance you're in Berlin on May 7th is our event, we may be able to get you in. We may, because it's part of an event that is a structured event, but we'll figure something out. Or maybe we can all meet. Wait a minute. How about an after hours meeting, Rob? We can do a, what do they call those already? There's a word for that.
Leisure time. Feierabend.
I don't know, whatever it is. Anyway, we can also do that, and everybody knows how to get a hold of us. You can contact Rob at what I just said.
Yeah, just really quickly, Randy. I'm at on Instagram. I'm just at VRWine, just like you said. And if anybody wants to shoot me an email or message, it's just info@vrwine.com. So, or message on Instagram. All is good. But yeah, thanks, man. I love you guys. This is awesome. It's the best thing that happened all week to me.
And you're a true visionary, Rob. Thanks for joining us. We'll be
Hey, man, that'd
looking
be
forward to seeing you in something like 10, 15
Dude,
days. I don't know.
time is flying, my
I know.
friend. It's flying.
It's
and I'm
a
going to see
pro-
you in Bordeaux too. We'll talk when I see it here.
Just wait till you get to my age. It flies even much faster because there's so much less of it left, right? Thanks to Corrado. Thanks to Hank. Thanks to Jay. And Jay, stick with us, everybody, by the way, because we have a little after hours thing that's private. Thanks to Michael and thanks to Rob in Berlin. We're going to call it quits here as soon as I find the button to push, which I think may be right here.
That was so awesome.